2025 went by very quickly, so let's jump right into it and see which products made this year's top 10 list. The first product to make the 2025 top 10 list is the Viofo dash cam. In the first test, I compared the performance of the dash cameras facing into the sun, and many of the cameras really struggle to provide a clear image of the distance markers. Many struggle to provide a clear readable image of the license plate from 10 feet out. The Wolfbox is a very good dash camera, and I compared it to the Viofo. License plate readability facing into the sun is somewhat subjective, but the Viofo finished in first place on this test. The Viofo also finished in first place with producing a readable image of the license plate from 30 feet away. The Viofo also finished in a three-way tie for first place for light exposure facing into the sun. I then compared the performance of the dash cams at reading a road sign while driving past it at 35 miles per hour. Some of the cameras really struggled on this test. Even when stopping the video footage, I could only read one of the two signs for several of the cameras. Comparing the Wolfbox to the Viofo, both cameras did an amazing job this time, with the small advantage going to the Wolfbox. In this category of testing, the Viofo tied for third place with two other brands. Pulling up to an intersection and facing into the sun really put the cameras to the test, and several cameras were not able to provide a readable image of the signs above and below the stop sign. This time the Viofo definitely outperformed the Wolfbox, and both signs are very easy to read. Even the sign on the far side of the intersection is very easy to read. The Viofo tied for first place in this category with the Red Tiger dash cam. Having a dash camera that can deliver a clear image after dark is pretty important, and many of the cameras really struggled on this test. However, the Viofo performed extremely well in this test and provided a clear image of the street sign from the farthest distance away and finished in first place in this category. The most challenging test in this review includes providing a clear image of a light box display with digital numbers. Most of the cameras really struggled in this test, providing very blurry and unreadable video footage. However, the Viofo ran circles around the competition, delivering a very clear image. Very impressive! And the Viofo once again finished in first place in this category. And the Viofo came in on top with a first place finish in this showdown and definitely earned a spot in the top 10 list this year. The Wolfbox Air Duster also made the top 10 list this year. A lot of people use canned air, but the Wolfbox Air Duster proved to be much better. In the first test, air dusters competed to produce the most airspeed. Some of the air dusters really struggled to produce a lot of air movement, but not the Wolfbox. And the Wolfbox moves into second place behind the Duarte at 53.1 meters per second or 118.8 miles per hour. With an air nozzle, the meter is pegged very quickly. So the Wolfbox definitely seems to be well over 200 miles per hour. Very impressive. After the first test, the Wolfbox finished in second place for airspeed without the air nozzle installed. With the air nozzle installed, the Wolfbox tied for first place and had an airspeed that exceeded the capability of the airspeed meter of 190 plus miles per hour. Very impressive. Wind pressure indicates the force in which air is expelled, and a higher pressure can provide more cleaning power. Many of the brands fell flat on their face when put to the test, but the Wolfbox makes a tremendous amount of force at around 334 grams. This time, the Wolfbox finished in first place in a category that's critically important. Another important factor to consider is air volume, or CFM. Simply put, that's how much air each air duster is moving. Some of the air dusters just don't move enough air to be effective. However, the Wolfbox performed surprisingly well for such a small tool at around 73 CFM. Once again, the Wolfbox came in on top and ran circles around the competition in this category. An air duster that produces both good airspeed and air volume can do a lot of work quickly. Unfortunately, some of the air dusters needed 12 seconds, 25 seconds, and even one that required over 1 minute to move the wood chips. However, the Wolfbox moved all the wood chips in just over 2 seconds. Very impressive! Adding up the results for all the testing, and the Wolfbox ran circles around the competition by finishing in first place in all but one test. The Wolfbox is one of my favorite tools this year, and it's an air duster that definitely deserves to be in the top 10 list. The next item to make the top 10 list is a Jaeger Auto Jump Starter at a price of around $81. In the first test, I attempted to jump start an old Ford Ranger with a completely drained battery. Before testing the Jaeger Auto, I tested a much cheaper jump starter, the Charmeal brand. The Charmeal won't work with a completely dead battery, and I'll have to use another jump starter to excite the Charmeal. Unfortunately, the Charmeal didn't get excited enough and only lasted about a second. The Jaeger Auto also has a boost button that'll work with a completely dead battery. And the Jaeger Auto is making this look way too easy. Let's see if it'll last 10 seconds. And I ended the test at just over 11 seconds, which is by far the best yet. After testing 14 jump starters, the Jaeger Auto finished in 4th place with a very good rating of 2. Not all of the jump starters that I tested had built-in tire inflators. However, the Jaeger Auto does have a built-in tire inflator. The Jaeger Auto ran circles around the competition, inflating a completely flat tire in 2 minutes faster than the competition. Before we attempt to jump start a diesel engine, let's see how the jump starters perform on Cousin Eddie's Farmabago that has a 454 big block V8. The Farmabago doesn't have any fuel in it, so let's see how long it'll turn over the engine. The battery is just over 7 volts, but this will definitely be a challenge for some of the jump starters. The 454 is just way too much for the Charmeal. The Jaeger Auto continues to impress as it packs a pretty powerful punch. A high engine turnover speed lasting over 10 seconds is by far the best so far. Not bad for a jump starter that has a built-in air compressor. Once again, the Jaeger Auto performed very well, finishing in a three-way tie for second place with a rating of 1.5. The $370 NOCO finished in first place once again. This Dodge Ram 2500 with a diesel engine requires 2 car batteries. Let's use a battery made of solid wood that Cousin Eddie made for us a couple years ago. On the other side, let's install the same battery that was used in the Farmabago. And the Jaeger Auto performed quite a bit better than most of the brands in the previous test, and the Jaeger Auto successfully started the diesel engine back-to-back 3 times. That's really good for a jump starter that has a built-in air compressor. The Jaeger Auto is the only one of 3 jump starters that were able to jump start the diesel engine 3 times back-to-back. If you want a jump starter that can also work as a battery bank to charge your cell phone, the Jaeger Auto finished in 4th place at almost 60 watt-hours and outperformed several more expensive jump starters. The Jaeger Auto is a terrific jump starter with a built-in tire inflator that deserves a place in the top 10 list this year. The DXZ TAS inspection camera is the next item to make the list. Fortunately, you don't have to spend $1,000 for a good inspection camera. In the first test, I compared the performance of the inspection cameras at reading the fine print on the drill bit case. Most of the cameras really struggle to provide a clear image. However, the image produced by the DXZ TAS is pretty impressive. And the DXZ TAS tied for first place with 2 other brands for producing the best quality video recording. It also tied for first place in the category for being able to focus the closest at a ½ inch. I then compared the performance of the inspection cameras to looking into the combustion chamber of an engine. Most of the cameras really struggled to capture a clear image of the letters and numbers, but the DXZ TAS did by far the best. After testing all the inspection cameras, the DXZ finished in first place with the best average finish with a very good rating of 2. I placed several shiny coins inside the engine to really put the inspection cameras to the test. Providing a clear image of shining objects is an extremely tough test. Once again, most of the inspection cameras really struggle with light reflection. However, the DXZ produced by far the most crisp and clear image of all the brands. Even the cylinder wall scratches are very easy to see. Very impressive. Once again, the DXZ TAS finished in first place with a very good rating of 1.3. After crunching the numbers after doing all the testing, the DXZ TAS had the best composite score of 1.7, finishing in first place. This inspection camera definitely deserves to be on the top 10 list this year. If you want your car's paint job to last a long time, a ceramic coating can make a huge difference, and the G-Technique earned a spot in this year's top 10 list. To test the products, I first used a powerful strip wash and a clay bar to remove everything from the paint on our test vehicle. I then created 8 different test areas and then applied each of the products carefully following the manufacturer's instructions. Soak the application pad and work the liquid into the pad to get an even saturation. Apply in overlapping strokes to an area roughly 2 feet by 2 feet. Remove the residue with the microfiber cloth. After applying all the products, I then compared the slickness of the products using a sponge with 5 pounds on top. And the G-Technique started off very strong on this test with a second place finish, but things are about to become very interesting. I then tested the hydrophobic qualities of each of the ceramic coatings. And the G-Technique's hydrophobic qualities are simply amazing. To test the durability of the coatings, I then applied strip wash. The strip wash is very powerful, and it pretty much destroyed the hydrophobic qualities of one of the products. However, the G-Technique still looks as good as new, and the water is forming tight beads. Very impressive. After the first test, the G-Technique and 2 other brands are now tied for first place. But things are about to become much more challenging with iron remover. The iron remover caused a lot of damage to some of the ceramic coatings, but the G-Technique still looks as good as new. After the iron remover, the G-Technique is still in a 3-way tie for first place, but that's about to change with bug and tar remover. The bug and tar remover did quite a bit of damage to most of the ceramic coatings, and the water is forming a sheet instead of beading. After the bug and tar remover, the G-Technique and the Atoms are now tied for first place, but they're about to really experience a tough test with wheel and tire cleaner. And a wheel and tire cleaner caused a tremendous amount of damage to most of the coatings, but the G-Technique is still looking almost as good as new. Very impressive! The G-Technique is now in first place, with the Atoms also performing very well in a close second. So the question remains, can any of the ceramic coatings survive a very powerful degreaser? The G-Technique is on the left and the Atoms is on the right. The G-Technique is forming tighter water beads and has a little bit better hydrophobic qualities compared to the Atoms. So after being exposed to strip wash, iron remover, bug and tar remover, wheel and tire cleaner, and now degreaser, the G-Technique came out on top with the best possible rating of 1.5. After applying all the cleaning products, I once again tested the slickness of the paint. And this time the G-Technique came out on top. The G-Technique is definitely the best ceramic coating I've ever tested and definitely deserves a spot on this year's top 10 list. The Ansel car battery tester is another terrific tool that made this year's top 10 list. This $35 car battery tester might save you from replacing a $150 to $200 car battery that's still good. Before I tested the electronic battery testers, I first used a carbon pile tester to test the cranking amps of a brand new car battery. I then used a separate tester to measure internal resistance, which is basically resistance to current flow inside of a battery. I then compared the performance of the car battery testers on how accurately they analyzed the new car battery. Just over half the car battery testers, including the Ansel brand, provided a pretty accurate voltage reading. The new car battery was fully charged, and 3 of the testers incorrectly reported that the battery was not fully charged. Again, the Ansel got this one right. Once again, the Ansel provided a really close calculation on the cold cranking amps for the new car battery. However, some of the testers were way off target. I then repeated all of the same tests on a car battery that's in very poor condition. Once again, most of the car battery testers provided a pretty accurate voltage reading and cold cranking amp calculation. I then tested the battery tester's ability to analyze the cranking system and charging system of a vehicle. This is a very important capability since a bad starter or an alternator could be faulty and not the car battery. Most of the testers, including the Ansel, correctly identified the battery, starter, and charging system as normal. However, some of the testers made mistakes. I converted the actual performance of the testers into an A through F rating or pass-fail system to help the results make more sense. As you can see, there's a lot of orange and red on this chart, which is not good. However, the Ansel passed every single test with flying colors and performed just as well as the more expensive analyzers. What a great tool for a price of around $35. The next product to earn a spot in the top 10 list is this Civivi folding knife for a price of around $30. It has a 3-inch blade and it's very light at just under 79 grams. Using a piece of paper to test sharpness is definitely not a very precise way to test for sharpness, so I used a blade sharpness tester. And the Civivi is a #1 seller on Amazon, and it seems to make sense with a sharpness score of 130. Very impressive! After testing a total of 19 knives for initial sharpness, the Civivi came out on top as the sharpest knife. I then compared all the knives for how smoothly they open. And the Civivi has ball bearing construction and it opened very easily at only 11 grams. It once again performed very well in this category, finishing in a 2-way tie with a different knife that cost $265. The ability of a knife to hold a blade edge is a pretty big deal, so I used a piece of Osage orange, which is a really hard wood. I then placed 5 pounds on top of each of the knives and then made 150 back and forth passes. The Civivi started off super sharp at 130 and now it's at 265. A super sharp blade edge is more subjective to blade edge damage. Even so, the Civivi still performed well, finishing in 8th place on this test out of 19 knives. I then used a knife sharpener to sharpen all the knives as evenly as possible. I also used a leather strap to put the finishing touch on each of the knife edges. After sharpening all the knives, I then tested them once again for sharpness, and the Civivi is also sharper than a utility knife blade at 105. The Civivi tied for 4th place with several other brands, which is pretty impressive for a budget knife. But the question remains, how well does the Civivi compare for blade edge retention with the other knives? To test this, I once again ran all the knives back and forth across a bamboo cutting board 50 times, and then I retested all the knives for sharpness. The Civivi started off super sharp at 105 and is still very sharp with a sharpness score of 150. Considering the price, the Civivi did very well in this test with an 8th place finish out of 19 knives. I then compared the knives for blade tip durability by dropping the knives onto a steel plate from 4.5 feet. Several knives experienced significant damage to the blade tip, but the Civivi held up really well. A knife blade that is really loose and moves side to side can be a challenge to use efficiently in some situations. For such a small and lightweight knife, the Civivi did a terrific job at only 4.36 millimeters and finished in 3rd place in this category. When calculating the test results for all the categories, the Civivi finished in 2nd place behind a knife that cost over 10 times as much. Definitely a great knife for only $30 and definitely a well-earned spot on the top 10 list. And the digital Jayco tire gauge also earned a spot in the top 10 list. To measure the accuracy of gauges, I purchased 2 gauges for each brand. I bought analog, digital, and the pencil style gauges. I put together a tester to compare the gauges at low, medium, and high pressure. The tester has 2 calibrated and certified gauges that are incredibly precise. Comparing the gauges at 16 psi, some of the gauges are way off. However, both of the electronic Jayco gauges were within 0.2 psi of the tester at 15.8, which is pretty impressive. I then tested the gauges at 40 psi. Once again, some of the gauges were way off target by as much as 9 psi. On the other hand, the electronic Jayco gauges once again did an amazing job at 39.8 and 39.9 psi. Testing the gauges at 60 psi, once again, some of the gauges really missed the target by as much as 9 psi. However, both of the electronic Jayco gauges were incredibly accurate and achieved a perfect 60 psi reading for both gauges. Very impressive! Adding up the total psi errors for both gauges, the Jayco digital gauges finished in 1st place for the 60 psi test. I always keep a tire pressure gauge in my vehicles, and the inside of a vehicle can become very hot like I experienced in this review at around 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Unfortunately, the high heat did cause problems for several gauges and caused pressures to read unusually low or high. Other gauges fell apart after being inside the hot vehicle. However, the Jayco gauges didn't seem hurt by the heat, as one gauge scored perfect and the other gauge was within 0.1 psi. I then placed the gauges in a freezer set to minus 20 degrees Celsius, which works out to approximately minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit. The cold temperature caused some of the gauges to behave very strangely. It also caused one of the gauges to self-destruct. However, the electronic Jayco once again was very close to hitting the 40 psi target at 40 and 40.1 psi. If you add up all the errors for all 10 measurements, the electronic Jayco ran circles around the competition with a cumulative error rate of less than 1 psi. The electronic Jayco definitely earned a place in the top 10. The Craftsman diamond tip screwdrivers also made this year's top 10 list. I first tested the durability of the Phillips screwdrivers. I'll first cut through the shaft of the screwdriver. I'll then grind 3 sides to the shaft so that a drill chuck can maintain a tight grip on the screwdriver. I purchased 15 pounds of these 3-inch coarse threaded drywall screws. I'll drive in 50 screws per brand into fully cured 4x4 lumber to see how the screwdrivers hold up. I'll use a 1/4-inch keyless chuck that'll mount to an impact driver. After installing and then attempting to remove all 50 screws, some of the screwdrivers were completely worn out. And the diamond tip Craftsman screwdriver set is making this look way too easy and maintaining a very strong grip. After installing and then removing all 50 screws, the Craftsman still looks nearly as good as new. Very impressive! Let's use a drill press to compare the performance of the number 2 Phillips screwdrivers after installing and removing the 50 screws. There's a wheel attached to the lever arms on the drill press. With 5 pounds of weight attached to the rope, there's just over 22 pounds of downward force on the weight scale. I'll replace the screw after testing each screwdriver. After installing and then attempting to remove 50 screws, some of the screwdrivers really struggled at around 20 inch-pounds. The Craftsman performed very well with an impressive 103 inch-pounds in the tightening direction. It performed even better in the loosening direction at 117 inch-pounds. Taking the average of the tightening and loosening torque, the Craftsman finished in first place and even outperformed the $220 set of Snap-on screwdrivers. The Craftsman is a great set of screwdrivers that deserves a spot on this year's top 10 list. This is the first time the Craftsman has ever won a competition, and the Craftsman seems pretty excited with some pretty fancy dance moves. The final product to make the top 10 list this year is the Drio Tower Space Heater. In the first test, I measured the noise level of the space heaters on low and high heat. Some of the space heaters are pretty loud at over 57 decibels. However, the Drio performed well at only 48 decibels on the highest heat setting. I then compared thermostat noise. Once again, some of the space heaters make a really loud clicking sound at around 60 decibels. The Drio Tower Space Heater has one of the quietest thermostats at under 54 decibels. Let's compare the ability of the space heaters to broadcast heat 36 inches. There are 3 thermometers placed about 20 inches apart from each other. I'll aim the space heater towards the center thermometer. Some of the space heaters really struggled in this test and were only able to broadcast enough heat to increase the temperature by a couple of degrees. The temperature increase for all 3 test zones is 18.1 degrees to move into the lead. So after testing all the space heaters, the Drio finished in second place behind the more expensive Real Smart heater. I then tested the space heaters for safety. Not all the space heaters are as safe as a Drio when tip over occurs. However, most of the space heaters performed well on this test, and so did the Drio. Many fires are started when space heaters become too close or come into contact with flammable items or curtains. Some of the space heaters took a very long time to power down, causing visible smoke to come from the pillow cover or space heater. The pillow cover became very hot. The Drio Tower fan also claims to have overheat protection. And the Drio Tower fan's heating element just powered down at 24 seconds and the alarm has been activated. And 190 degrees is the best yet. Things went really poorly for the propane space heater when it was covered. After several performance tests and 2 safety tests, the Drio Tower heater finished in first place overall. Definitely a top 10 product of the year. You can easily find all the top 10 products in the video description. There's links to each of the products. Also, all the videos in this channel, including this one, are viewer suggested. So if you have a video idea, I hope you'll take time to leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care and look forward to next time.